I never thought a snow shovel would be the catalyst that would unravel the entire petty empire of our HOA president. But here we are. My name is Henry Zimmerman, and I have lived in the Whispering Pines subdivision in suburban Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, for the past 8 years. I bought my modest 3-bedroom colonial back when the housing market was just starting to recover, and despite the occasional HOA headache, I genuinely loved my neighborhood. The tree-lined streets, the well-maintained common areas, and the sense of community made it feel like home. What I did not love was Patricia Henderson, our HOA president, who seemed to believe that her title gave her authority over every single aspect of our lives. Patricia was the textbook definition of a HOA tyrant. At 53 years old, she had perfectly coiffed blonde hair that never seemed to move, even in strong winds, designer athleisure, where that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and an expression that looked like she perpetually smelled something unpleasant. She drove a white Mercedes SUV with vanity plates that read "Pres for You" and parked it prominently in front of the community clubhouse during meetings, as if to remind everyone of her self-importance. The trouble started on a frigid Tuesday morning in late January. I woke up to find nearly 18 inches of fresh snow blanketing everything in sight. The forecast had predicted a significant storm, but like most Pittsburghers, I had not fully appreciated just how much snow we would actually get. I made my coffee, threw on my heavy winter coat, boots, and gloves, and headed out to my garage to grab my snow shovel, except it was not there. I stood in my garage, staring at the empty spot where my shovel should have been. This was not just any shovel. It was a professional-grade aluminum snow shovel with an ergonomic handle that I had purchased 3 years ago after throwing out my back with a cheaper model. More importantly, I had written my name and address on the handle in permanent marker, because tools have a habit of wandering away in neighborhood settings. I checked my entire garage, thinking maybe I had moved it somewhere and forgotten. Nothing. I even checked my small shed in the backyard, trudging through knee-deep snow to get there. Still nothing. Someone had taken my shovel, and I had a pretty good idea who. The previous week, Patricia had sent out one of her infamous mass emails to all residents. This one detailed new community standards regarding snow removal. According to her interpretation of the HOA bylaws, all driveways and walkways needed to be cleared within 4 hours of snowfall ceasing. Failure to comply would result in fines starting at $100. I had replied to that email, perhaps less diplomatically than I should have, pointing out that the bylaws said no such thing and that she was overstepping her authority. Again, Patricia did not like being contradicted. She especially did not like being contradicted by me. Our history went back several years. When I first moved in, I made the mistake of running for the HOA board because I actually wanted to help improve the neighborhood. I lost to Patricia by a narrow margin, and she had treated me like a threat to her domain ever since. I questioned her decisions. I called out her rule interpretations when they were wrong, and I generally represented everything she hated. Someone who would not just roll over and accept her word as law. I grabbed my backup shovel, an old plastic one that was barely functional, and started clearing my driveway. The cheap shovel cracked on my third scoop. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I was going to have to drive to the hardware store in this mess, assuming my car could even make it out of the driveway. That is when I saw Patricia walking down the street, bundled up in a cream-colored parka that probably cost more than my entire winter wardrobe. She was pulling behind her a snow shovel. My snow shovel. I could see my handwriting on the handle even from a distance. "Patricia," I called out, waving to get her attention. "That is my shovel." She stopped and turned toward me with that pinched expression she always wore when forced to acknowledge my existence. "Excuse me." I trudged through the snow toward her, my boots sinking deep with each step. "That shovel. It has my name on it. It was taken from my garage." Patricia looked down at the shovel as if seeing it for the first time. "This is community property. I found it near the clubhouse." "Look at the handle," I said, pointing. "My name, my address, that is my personal property." She held the shovel closer, squinting at the faded marker. I watched her face as she read Henry Zimmerman, 472 Maple Grove Lane in my handwriting. For a brief moment, something flickered across her face, something that might have been embarrassment or acknowledgement, but it vanished quickly. "Someone must have borrowed it and left it there," she said, her tone dismissive. "You should keep better track of your belongings." "It was in my locked garage," I replied, fighting to keep my voice level, "which means someone entered my property and took it." "I highly doubt anyone would do such a thing in this neighborhood," Patricia said, clutching the shovel tighter. "Perhaps you left it out and forgot. Either way, I need it right now. The clubhouse walkway needs clearing." "Then use the clubhouse shovel. That is mine and I need it for my driveway." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "According to HOA bylaws, all residents must contribute to community maintenance. I am requisitioning this shovel for community use. You can collect it from the clubhouse later." "You cannot requisition my personal property," I said, my patience wearing thin. "That is theft, Patricia. Give me back my shovel." Several neighbors had started emerging from their homes, drawn by our raised voices. Patricia glanced around, clearly aware that she had an audience. She straightened her posture, lifting her chin in that imperious way she had perfected. "Mr. Zimmerman, if you continue to harass me and interfere with HOA business, I will have no choice but to file a formal complaint and fine you for non-compliance with community standards. Your driveway is not yet cleared, and you are currently in violation." "The snow stopped falling 40 minutes ago," I shot back. "Your made-up rule says 4 hours. The rule says snow removal must be prioritized. You are standing here arguing instead of clearing your driveway. That shows lack of prioritization." She turned and started walking away with my shovel. I stood there in disbelief, watching her march down the street. My hands clenched into fists inside my gloves. I had dealt with Patricia's petty tyranny for years, but this was outright theft. She had gone too far. Mrs. Chen from next door approached me carefully, her own shovel in hand. "Henry, did she really just take your shovel?" "Yeah, Linda. Yeah, she did." "That woman is unbelievable," Linda muttered, shaking her head. "My husband and I have been talking about trying to vote her out at the next election." "I think it might be time to make that happen," I said, already formulating a plan. But first, I needed to deal with my immediate problem. I could not clear my driveway, and I needed to get to work. I was not just some regular office worker who could work from home. I owned a private snow removal business, Zimmerman Snow Services, and January was my busiest time of year. More than that, I held contracts with 3 local townships, including our own Morrison Township, to help with municipal snow plowing when storms exceeded certain thresholds. Today was definitely one of those days. My phone had already been buzzing with messages from my crew and from the township supervisor. They needed every plow on the road. I called my business partner, Jake Reynolds, who managed our equipment yard. "Henry, where are you?" Jake answered on the first ring. "We have got Morrison, Belmont, and Franklin all calling for full deployment." I know. I am having a situation at home. I will be there in 30 minutes. Make it 20 if you can. This is going to be a long day." I managed to shovel enough of my driveway with a garden spade to get my truck out, then headed to our equipment yard on the industrial side of Morrison Township. The yard housed our fleet of 6 plow trucks, 2 front-end loaders, and various other snow removal equipment. It was not a huge operation, but it was mine, built from the ground up over 12 years. The day passed in a blur of white. I spent 14 hours behind the wheel of my truck, plowing residential streets, township roads, and parking lots. The radio crackled constantly with updates and new assignments. My crew was spread across 3 townships, each of us taking different zones according to our contracts. Around hour 10, while clearing a section of Morrison Township's main thoroughfare, I passed through my own subdivision. Whispering Pines looked like a winter postcard, with snow-covered roofs and icicles hanging from gutters. I noticed that most driveways had been cleared by now. I also noticed Patricia's house, a large colonial at the corner of Maple Grove and Pine Street, with a perfectly cleared driveway and walkway. I wondered if she had used my shovel for her own property after commandeering it for community use. By the time I got home that night, it was past 11. I was exhausted, hungry, and still annoyed about the morning's confrontation. My driveway remained only partially cleared from my makeshift garden spade work. I was too tired to care. I would deal with it tomorrow. The next morning, I found a notice taped to my front door. Notice of violation, it read in bold letters at the top. Property at 472 Maple Grove Lane is in violation of HOA Community Standards Section 4.3 regarding snow removal. Driveway and walkway were not cleared within the required time frame. Fine, $100. Failure to pay within 10 days will result in additional penalties. Patricia Henderson, HOA President. I crumpled the notice in my fist. This was absolutely ridiculous. I had been out plowing the township roads so that Patricia and everyone else could actually drive anywhere, and she was fining me for not clearing my own driveway fast enough. I called Linda Chen. "Hey, Linda, did you get a violation notice about snow removal?" "What? No, should I have?" "Your driveway was not cleared until evening yesterday. I saw it when I drove through." "That is true," Linda admitted. "Steve had to work, and I did not get to it until he got home around 6. You think Patricia is singling you out? I know she is. I spent that morning documenting everything. I took photos of the violation notice, photos of my driveway's current state, and photos of several other driveways in the neighborhood that had not been cleared until late yesterday or even this morning. I then drafted a formal complaint about Patricia taking my personal property and about selective enforcement of HOA rules. The HOA board consisted of 5 members: Patricia as president, Tom Bartley as vice president, Susan Moore as secretary, David Palmer as treasurer, and Rachel Green as member at large. I knew Tom was basically Patricia's puppet, but the others occasionally showed some independence. I emailed my complaint to all 4 board members, excluding Patricia, and requested a special meeting. Susan Moore responded within an hour. "Henry, I received your complaint. This is concerning. I will speak with the other board members about scheduling a meeting." David Palmer replied shortly after. "I have also witnessed some concerning behavior. Let's definitely meet." That was promising. Maybe I was not the only one tired of Patricia's reign. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at the clubhouse. In the meantime, I had more pressing matters to attend to. The storm system had not finished with us yet. Another major snowfall was forecasted for Friday night into Saturday morning, and the townships were already calling for pre-positioning of equipment. Friday afternoon, I received a call from Chuck Morris, the Morrison Township supervisor. Chuck was a gruff man in his 60s who had worked in municipal services his entire career. We had a good working relationship built over 6 years of reliable service. "Henry, I have got the new contract ready for you to sign," Chuck said. "It is a 3-year renewal with the increased payment rate we discussed." "That is great, Chuck. I can stop by Monday to sign." "Actually, we are doing a press thing tomorrow morning. Local newspaper wants to do a piece about our snow removal operations, highlight our contractors, that sort of public relations stuff. Any chance you could swing by the Township building around 10? We will have the contracts there. Get some photos, make it official." I hesitated, thinking about the HOA meeting scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. "Yeah, I can make that work. Perfect. Bring your plow truck if you can. They want action shots." "Will do." Saturday morning arrived with another 8 inches of fresh snow. I was up at 5, heading to the yard to deploy the crew for another round of plowing. By 9:30, I had cleared my assigned zones and headed to the Morrison Township building with my truck. The Township building was a modern brick structure on Route 22, with the municipal offices, police department, and public works all housed in the same complex. Several news vans were already parked outside when I arrived, which surprised me. I had thought this would be a small local paper thing, but apparently the local TV stations were interested too. Chuck met me in the parking lot, grinning widely. "Henry, perfect timing. We have got Channel 4 and Channel 11 here, plus the Post-Gazette and the Tribune-Review. Slow news day, I guess, so they are all hungry for a local interest story." I felt slightly underdressed in my work jeans and company jacket, but this was what I wore while plowing, so it would have to do. The next hour was a whirlwind of interviews and photos. They filmed my truck with the plow down, had me pose signing the contract with Chuck, and interviewed me about running a small business and serving the community. Chuck made a big deal about how reliable my company had been, and how the Township was proud to extend our contract for 3 more years. Zimmerman Snow Services has been instrumental in keeping Morrison Township safe and accessible during winter weather, Chuck told the cameras. "Henry and his crew work around the clock during storms, and we are thrilled to continue our partnership." One reporter from Channel 4, a woman named Jessica Torres, seemed particularly interested in the business side. "So you are a local resident yourself, right? You live in Morrison Township?" "Yes, in the Whispering Pines subdivision," I replied. "And you are the primary contractor for the Township's residential street plowing?" "My company handles about 60% of the residential areas." "Yes." "The Township's Public Works Department handles the main arteries and priority routes, and we supplement them with the residential streets and some overflow work." "That is quite a responsibility. What does a contract like this mean for your business?" I smiled. "It is significant. It is steady work. It allows me to employ 8 full-time people and several seasonal workers, and it means we can invest in better equipment to serve the community." They wrapped up the interviews around 11:30, and I stayed for a few more minutes to chat with Chuck and the other Township officials. The contract I had just signed was worth roughly $350,000 per year, guaranteed for 3 years with options for extension. It was the backbone of my business. As I was leaving, Chuck stopped me. "Hey, Henry, one more thing. We are going to be putting out a press release about all the contract renewals this quarter. Yours is the biggest, so expect to see your name in the paper a lot over the next few weeks." "Thanks for the heads up, Chuck." I drove home feeling pretty good despite the early morning and the heavy work ahead. At least something was going right. That feeling lasted until I walked into the HOA meeting at 2 o'clock. The clubhouse was a small single-story building near the neighborhood entrance, with a main room used for meetings and events, a kitchenette, and a couple of storage rooms. About 15 residents had shown up for the meeting, more than usual, which suggested that word had spread about my complaint. Patricia sat at the front table with Tom, Susan, David, and Rachel. She looked composed and confident, her notebook open in front of her, her reading glasses perched on her nose. When I walked in, her expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Zimmerman," she said with forced politeness, "please take a seat. We will address your complaint during new business." "Actually," Susan interjected, "given the nature of Henry's complaint, I think we should address it first. It is a serious allegation." Patricia's jaw clenched. "I hardly think I agree with Susan," David said firmly. "Let's address this now." Rachel nodded her agreement. Tom looked uncomfortable but stayed silent. Patricia's facade cracked slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Very well. Mr. Zimmerman, you have alleged that I took your personal property. I already explained to you that I found a shovel near the clubhouse and used it for community property maintenance. If it was yours, then someone must have borrowed it." "My garage was locked," I said, standing up so everyone could hear me clearly. "No one had permission to borrow anything. The shovel was taken from my property, and you refused to return it even after I identified it as mine with my name written on it." "I needed it for community purposes," Patricia insisted. "And frankly, your driveway was not cleared in a timely manner, which is why you received a violation notice." "Which brings me to my second complaint," I continued. "Selective enforcement. My driveway was not cleared quickly because I was working a 14-hour shift plowing the township roads. Meanwhile, at least 6 other properties did not have their driveways cleared until much later, and none of them received violations." I pulled out my printed photos and passed them to Susan. "These are time-stamped photos from Wednesday evening showing multiple uncleared driveways, including Linda and Steve Chen at 470 Maple Grove, the Patels at 445 Maple Grove, and the Johnsons at 412 Pine Street. None of them were fined." Susan examined the photos, then passed them to David and Rachel. Patricia's face was turning red. "Those properties may have had extenuating circumstances," Patricia said stiffly. "Like what?" I challenged. "Because my extenuating circumstance was literally keeping the roads clear so emergency vehicles could get through the neighborhood." "This is ridiculous," Patricia snapped. "I do not have to justify every decision to you, Mr. Zimmerman. As HOA president, I have the authority to interpret and enforce our bylaws." "Actually, you do not," Rachel said quietly. She was a lawyer who worked in family law, and while she usually stayed out of HOA drama, she knew the rules. "The board as a whole has that authority, Patricia, not you individually." "I think we need to vote on rescinding Henry's fine," David said. "All in favor?" Susan, David, and Rachel all raised their hands. Tom hesitated, glanced at Patricia, and then reluctantly raised his hand too. "Motion passes," Susan said. "Henry, your fine is rescinded." Patricia looked like she wanted to explode, but she maintained her composure through sheer force of will. "Fine. Is there any other business?" "Yes," I said. "I want my shovel back." "I do not know where it is," Patricia said coldly. "I used it for the clubhouse walkway and left it here. If it is gone now, someone must have taken it. That was convenient." I was certain she had taken it home, but I had no way to prove it. "Then the HOA can reimburse me for the cost of the shovel," I said. "It was taken while in your custody." "The HOA is not responsible for lost or stolen property," Patricia retorted. "The HOA president took the property and then lost it," Rachel corrected. "I think we do have some liability here. What did the shovel cost, Henry?" $85. "I move that we reimburse Henry $85, David said. "Second," Susan added. Another vote. Another 4-1 decision, with only Patricia voting against. Patricia gathered her papers with jerky, angry movements. "If there is no further business, this meeting is adjourned." She did not wait for a response, just stood up and walked toward the door. But before she reached it, the door opened. Linda Chen walked in, slightly out of breath. "I am sorry I am late," Linda said, "but I thought everyone should see this." She held up her phone, showing the local news website. The headline read, "Morrison Township renews contract with local snow removal company for $1 million. Henry Zimmerman is all over the news," Linda said, turning the phone so everyone could see. "He is the township's primary snow removal contractor." Patricia had frozen in place, her hand still on the door handle. Slowly, very slowly, she turned around. Her face had gone pale. "You," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You are the township contractor." "One of them, yes," I replied, confused by her reaction. "That means you report directly to Chuck Morris." It was not a question. "Chuck is the township supervisor, so yes, I work with him regularly." Patricia's face went through several emotions in rapid succession: shock, fear, and then barely suppressed rage. "You did not think to mention this before." "Why would I need to? What does my business have to do with the HOA?" The room had gone very quiet. Everyone was watching Patricia, who seemed to be having some kind of internal crisis. "I did not know," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "I did not know it was him." Susan stood up. "Patricia, what is going on?" Patricia seemed to snap back to awareness. "Nothing. Nothing is going on. I have to leave." She pushed through the door and practically ran to her Mercedes. The room erupted in confused chatter. I was just as confused as everyone else. Why did my township contract matter to Patricia? David pulled out his phone and pulled up the news article Linda had shown. "Holy shit! Henry, this says your contract is worth over $1 million over 3 years. Plus the other township contracts," I added, still trying to figure out what had just happened with Patricia. "That is a big deal," Rachel said thoughtfully. "And Chuck Morris has a lot of influence in local politics." "You think Patricia is worried about political connections?" Susan asked. "Maybe," Rachel replied. "Or maybe there is something else going on." I drove home feeling even more confused than when I had arrived. Patricia's reaction had been bizarre, even for her. Why would she care about my township contracts? The answer came 2 days later in the form of a phone call from Chuck Morris. "Henry, I am sorry to bother you on a Sunday, but I need to ask you something," Chuck said, his tone serious. "Have you had any issues with your HOA lately?" My guard went up immediately. "Why do you ask?" "Because Patricia Henderson called my office Friday afternoon, before our press event on Saturday. She left a message with my assistant saying that there were concerns about your business and that the township should reconsider its contracts with you." My blood ran cold. "She did what?" "My assistant did not think much of it and did not tell me until this morning. But when I heard about it, I wanted to reach out. Patricia claimed that you were unreliable, that you had been neglecting your responsibilities, and that there had been complaints about your work. Is any of that true?" "Absolutely not. Chuck, you know me. You know my work." "I do, which is why I am calling instead of taking this seriously. But Henry, I need you to tell me what is going on between you and your HOA." I explained everything: the shovel theft, the unfair violation notice, Patricia's harassment over the years, and her strange reaction at the meeting when she learned about my township contracts. Chuck was silent for a long moment after I finished. "So she tried to sabotage your business contract before she knew you were the contractor. It looks that way. But Chuck, why would she call you? What would she gain?" "That is the question, is not it? I am going to make some calls. In the meantime, document everything. If she is targeting you personally, that is one thing. But if she is trying to interfere with township business, that is another thing entirely." That evening, I sat down and created a detailed timeline of every interaction I had had with Patricia over the past 2 years. Every unreasonable rule she had tried to enforce, every violation notice, every email exchange, every confrontation. The pattern was clear. She had been targeting me specifically, and it had escalated significantly in recent months. But why? The answer came from an unexpected source. Tom Bartley, the HOA vice president and Patricia's usual ally, called me on Monday evening. "Henry, this is Tom. I need to talk to you about something, and I need you to keep this confidential until I figure out what to do." "Okay," I said carefully. "Patricia has been using HOA funds inappropriately. I have suspected it for a while, but I did not want to believe it. After Saturday's meeting, I went through the financial records more carefully. There are discrepancies." "What kind of discrepancies?" "Money being paid to vendors that I cannot verify, receipts that do not add up, payments for services that never happened. I think she has been embezzling from the HOA. Jesus, how much? I am still going through everything, but at least $20,000 over the past year and a half, maybe more." "Have you told the other board members?" "Not yet. I wanted to confirm my suspicions first." "But Henry, there is something else. 3 months ago, Patricia submitted a payment request for snow removal services for the community entrance and common areas. She claimed we hired your company, did we?" "No, I have never done any work for the HOA." "That is what I thought." "She paid $5,000 to a company called Zimmerman Winter Services." "That is not my company. Mine is Zimmerman Snow Services." "I know. I think she created a fake company with a name similar to yours and paid the money to herself. And I think when she called the township to complain about you, she did not realize you were the same Henry Zimmerman. She thought you were just some random guy who happened to have a similar business name." The pieces were falling into place. Patricia had been embezzling money and using fake invoices with a name similar to mine. When I started questioning her authority and standing up to her, she became worried that I might look into the HOA finances and discover her fraud. She tried to discredit me with the township before she realized I was actually the township contractor. When she found out the truth, she panicked. "Tom, you need to report this to the police," I said firmly. "I know. I am meeting with David and Rachel tomorrow to show them what I found. If they agree, we will go to the police together. I can also file a complaint about her trying to interfere with my township contract. Chuck Morris is willing to document her call." "Good. The more evidence, the better." The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of police reports, emergency HOA meetings, and legal consultations. Tom, David, and Rachel presented the financial evidence to the board, and Patricia was immediately suspended from her position. A forensic accountant was hired to go through the HOA books completely. The final tally showed that Patricia had stolen more than $32,000 over 2 years. The police investigation revealed even more. Patricia had created several fake vendor accounts, all with names slightly modified from real local businesses. She had been approving payments to these fake accounts and then depositing the checks into a separate bank account she controlled. The fake Zimmerman Winter Services was just one of many. Patricia was arrested on charges of theft, fraud, and embezzlement. The story made the local news, especially because of the connection to the HOA and the attempted sabotage of my township contract. Chuck Morris gave a statement to reporters emphasizing that township contracts were awarded based on merit and performance, not influenced by personal complaints. "The professionalism and reliability of our contractors is paramount," Chuck told Channel 4. "An attempt to undermine that through false claims is taken very seriously. We stand behind our decision to work with Zimmerman Snow Services. Patricia's husband, Greg Henderson, filed for divorce shortly after her arrest. He claimed he had no knowledge of her financial crimes and cooperated fully with the investigation. Their house went up for sale within a month. The criminal proceedings moved relatively quickly. Patricia's lawyer negotiated a plea deal where she pleaded guilty to felony theft and fraud. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation. She was also ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA plus additional fines and penalties. The HOA held a special election for a new president. Rachel Green won by a landslide. One of her first acts was to issue a formal apology to me on behalf of the HOA and to implement new financial oversight procedures to prevent future fraud. We are also rescinding several of the overly restrictive rules that were implemented in recent years, Rachel announced at her first meeting as president. Our goal is to create a genuine community, not a dictatorship. That got applause from the assembled residents. Linda Chen approached me after the meeting. "So I guess you are not getting your shovel back," I laughed. "No, probably not. But you know what? The HOA reimbursement covered it and Patricia is in prison. I would say that is a fair trade." "She really did pick the wrong person to mess with," Linda said, shaking her head. "What are the odds that she would steal from the guy who literally has the contract to plow the township roads?" "Pretty low," I admitted. "But honestly, I think she would have been caught eventually anyway." She got sloppy, and Tom was already suspicious. The shovel thing just accelerated the timeline. Several months later, I was plowing during another snowstorm when I drove past the old Henderson house. New owners had moved in, a young couple with 2 small kids. I had met them briefly at a neighborhood barbecue. They seemed nice and were apparently thrilled to be living in a community with an HOA that actually functioned properly. The irony was not lost on me that my biggest confrontation with the HOA had stemmed from a stolen shovel. Something that cost less than $100 had been the catalyst for uncovering tens of thousands of dollars in fraud. If Patricia had just left my shovel alone, if she had not decided to flex her authority that particular morning, she might have gotten away with her scheme for much longer. But tyrants can never help themselves. They always push too far, pick one fight too many, cross one line too many. Patricia's need for control and her vindictive streak had been her downfall. My business continued to thrive. The publicity from the whole situation, while uncomfortable at times, had actually brought in new clients. People liked the idea of supporting a local business owner who stood up to corruption. I hired 2 more full-time employees and added another truck to the fleet. Chuck Morris and I developed an even better working relationship. He appreciated that I had handled the situation professionally and had not tried to use my township contracts as leverage against Patricia, even though she had tried to use them against me. "You have got integrity," Chuck told me over coffee one morning. "That matters. The township needs contractors we can trust, especially in critical services like snow removal. You proved that you are focused on doing the job right, regardless of personal drama." "I appreciate that, Chuck. This is my community too. I want it to be safe and functional." The following winter, I bought a new professional-grade snow shovel. This one was bright orange, highly visible, and I wrote my name on it in even bigger letters than before. I also installed security cameras in my garage just in case. Some might call it paranoid. I called it learning from experience. The HOA under Rachel's leadership became what it was supposed to be: an organization that maintained common areas, organized community events, and handled necessary administrative tasks without overreach or abuse of power. Violations were rare and only issued for legitimate concerns. Fines were reasonable and consistently applied. One evening the following spring, I was doing yard work when a moving truck pulled up to the house 3 doors down. A family was moving in, and I walked over to introduce myself and offer to help unload. "Welcome to Whispering Pines," I said, shaking hands with the father, whose name was Mark. "I am Henry Zimmerman from down the street." "Thanks. We are excited to be here. We heard this is a great neighborhood." "How is the HOA? That was our only concern, you know. We have heard horror stories from friends about crazy HOA boards." I smiled. "It is good now. Really good. We went through some changes recently. The current board is focused on community building, not power trips." "That is great to hear." Our last neighborhood had this president who was absolutely nuts. She tried to fine us for parking our car in our own driveway because she did not like the color. "Yeah, I know the type," I said, suppressing a laugh. "Trust me, you will be fine here." As I walked back to my house, I reflected on how much had changed in just over a year. The neighborhood felt lighter somehow, less tense. People were not constantly worried about arbitrary rules or surprise violations. Kids played in the streets without parents worrying about noise complaints. Neighbors actually talked to each other instead of viewing each other as potential HOA informants. That summer, the HOA organized a community block party, something we had not done in years. Rachel worked with several residents to plan activities, rent equipment, and arrange food. It was voluntary, funded by a reasonable special assessment that people actually voted to approve because they trusted how the money would be used. The party was held on a Saturday in July. The weather cooperated with sunny skies and comfortable temperatures. Someone had rented a bouncy castle for the kids. Grills were set up for burgers and hot dogs. A local band played covers of classic rock songs. People mingled and laughed, and actually seemed to enjoy being part of the community. I stood near the drink table, talking with David Palmer and Tom Bartley. Tom had been re-elected to the board, and to his credit, he had worked hard to regain the trust of the community after his long association with Patricia. "I still cannot believe how bad things got," Tom said, shaking his head. "I knew Patricia could be difficult, but I had no idea about the stealing. I should have looked closer at the finances earlier." "You caught it eventually," David said. "That is what matters. And you did the right thing by reporting it." "How much did the HOA recover?" I asked. "Most of it," David replied. He had taken over as treasurer after Patricia's arrest. Between the restitution payments and the insurance claim, we got back about $28,000 of the $32,000 she took. We are still waiting on some additional payments from the insurance company. "That is good, at least." "Yeah, and we have new procedures in place. Multiple people review all payments now. No single person can approve expenses over $500. We do quarterly financial reviews that get posted for all residents to see. It should not be possible for this to happen again." Rachel joined our conversation, holding a plate of food. "Are you guys talking about Patricia again?" "Sorry," Tom said sheepishly. "Hard not to, I know. But let's focus on the future. We have got a good thing going now. Approval ratings for the board are at an all-time high according to the last survey. People are actually happy." "Imagine that," I said with a grin. "An HOA that makes people happy." "Wild concept," Rachel laughed. "Hey, Henry, speaking of which, I wanted to ask you something. We are putting together a committee to plan next year's budget and projects. Would you be willing to serve on it?" "Your business experience would be valuable." I hesitated. My previous attempt to be involved with HOA governance had not gone well, thanks to Patricia, but things were different now. "Yeah, I would be happy to help," I said. The block party continued into the evening. As the sun set, someone brought out string lights that cast a warm glow over everything. Kids ran around with glow sticks. Adults sat in lawn chairs, talking and laughing. It felt like an actual community, not a collection of houses managed by a tyrant. Linda Chen found me near the end of the night. "This was really nice. We should do this more often." "I agree. It is amazing what happens when the HOA focuses on bringing people together instead of tearing them apart. You know, I was thinking about that whole situation with Patricia. The shovel thing, the township contract, all of it. What would have happened if you had not stood up to her? She would have kept stealing, kept abusing her authority, and the neighborhood would have gotten worse," I said. "Someone needed to push back." "Well, I am glad it was you. A lot of people would have just paid the fine and moved on." "I am stubborn like that," I admitted. "Plus, it was the principle of the thing. She stole my shovel." We both laughed at the absurdity of it. A stolen shovel had brought down an embezzler and transformed a neighborhood. Truth really was stranger than fiction. As I walked home that night, I passed my garage where my bright orange shovel hung prominently on the wall, visible through the open door. I had not locked the garage during the party. I did not need to. That was progress. The next winter brought more snow, more plowing contracts, and more early mornings battling the elements. But it also brought something I had not experienced in years: peace. There were no arbitrary violation notices, no confrontations about community standards, no HOA president drunk on power making everyone's life miserable. I even received a thank you card from the HOA board after a particularly brutal snowstorm where my crew worked 48 hours straight to keep the township roads clear. "Dear Henry, thank you for your dedication to our community during this week's severe weather. Your professionalism and hard work kept everyone safe. We are proud to have you as a resident of Whispering Pines. Sincerely, the HOA board." I put the card on my refrigerator. My younger self would not have believed that I would ever receive a thank you from the HOA instead of a violation notice. Years passed. My business grew. The neighborhood thrived. Rachel served 2 terms as HOA president before stepping down, and the transition to the next president was smooth and drama-free. The culture of reasonable governance and community focus that she had established continued. Patricia served her prison sentence and was released on parole. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had moved to another state to live with family. I never saw her again. Honestly, I did not think about her much. She was a cautionary tale, nothing more. I did, however, think about that Tuesday morning in January when she took my shovel. Not because I was still angry about it, but because it reminded me of an important lesson. Sometimes the smallest acts of standing up against injustice can have the biggest consequences. If I had let her keep the shovel, if I had just bought a new one and swallowed my frustration, Tom might never have started looking more carefully at the finances. Patricia might have stolen another 20 or 30,000 before getting caught. The neighborhood might have suffered under her rule for years longer, but I did not let it go. I stood up for myself over something as simple and seemingly insignificant as a snow shovel. And that small act of defiance started a chain of events that changed everything. On the 10-year anniversary of buying my house in Whispering Pines, I sat on my front porch on a warm summer evening, drinking a beer and watching kids ride bikes down the street. My orange snow shovel, now a bit worn but still functional, hung in my garage. I had bought several backup shovels over the years, but I kept that orange one in a place of honor. It was more than a tool. It was a reminder that standing up for yourself matters, that questioning authority is not disrespectful when that authority is being abused, that sometimes the smallest battles are worth fighting because they are part of the bigger war against injustice and abuse of power. And most importantly, it was a reminder that you never really know what is going to change your life. It might be a major decision, a career move, or a relationship. Or it might be a stolen snow shovel and a HOA Karen who finally picked the wrong fight with the wrong person. I finished my beer and went inside, content with the knowledge that my neighborhood was a better place than it had been a decade ago. Not perfect, because nowhere is perfect, but better. More fair, more just, more like what a community should be, and it all started with a snow shovel.